So the question is that going to backfire and make the problem with the bond market even worse? Because if foreign investors don't buy our treasuries, for example, that's going to mean that there's even less demand for them when the U.S. does need to issue them. And that makes the rates just continue to rise, at which people will actually bite and buy those U.S. Treasury bonds.
All righty, folks, it's time we talk Jamie Dimon and his warning that there is about to be an issue in the bond market. I do think we have to step back and realize that Jamie Dimon has been warning of things for a while. If you remember, he said we had a Category 5 hurricane coming to the U.S. economy just a couple of years ago. Is this just another warning that will not go anywhere? Is he talking about something that might happen in the next 6 months or 6 years? We're going to have this conversation with Anna Kelly. How you doing, Anna?
I'm doing great. Good to be here with you as always.
Absolutely. So I don't know if you've seen it, but in the last 48 hours, Jamie Dimon has been all over the news cycle, warning of some pain and shock coming to the bond market, basically saying long-term treasuries, the 10 and the 30-year, are going to go higher. It is going to cause the regulators, people that regulate even JP Morgan, to overreact. And frankly, Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan Chase will make more money. But yes, he thinks there's some shock coming to the bond market. Curious what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're already starting to see some of it. So although I have to say I did not read his actual articles the last couple of days, I've been totally tied up and outside of the news cycle for about 48 hours. But generally speaking, I agree with Jamie. He's a pretty smart guy. And he's saying a lot of the same things, quite frankly, you and I have been talking about on this show for a year at least, if not longer. And that is the reality that we still have more of a stagflationary type risk that is a bigger risk than just a recession. You know, everybody's talking about and ask us all the time, are we not in a recession? Is it coming? Is it not? And he's kind of saying that kind of misses the point, because the recession is a short-term blip. The bigger question is there a longer term pain that could potentially be tougher to get through and longer lasting than a recession, which normally lasts about 10 months. And Jamie's answer is the same as mine. And that is, yes, stagflation is something that we have to worry about. And that is just simply a stagnating economy where growth is low and inflation is higher than it needs to be for a period of low growth. And so those two things he's been talking about. And part of the challenge there is that the bond market and the smart money, if you will, the institutions, they're basically saying, what treasury rate do we need in order to give us a risk premium that's high enough to compensate for potential higher inflation in the future? And so the question is not so much about where is growth going to be, because usually if growth is going to be low, inflation is going to be low, and the bond market will accept a lower risk premium, i.e., a lower interest rate when they lock up their money for longer periods of time. So I think, and I haven't read his article, he's talking about kind of long-term treasury rates, like a 10-year plus. Mm-hmm. And the
Correct.
10-year is really what investors look at as the risk-free rate of return. And it's the rate in which kind of benchmarks all other cap rates or requirements for investors to make a risk premium. And it's the benchmark for mortgages, 30-year fixed mortgages. And so that is one of his concerns. And then the second one is this more of a structural issue? So on top of potentially higher inflation, the bigger issue is the U.S. debt at such a critical high point that it's going to be very, very difficult to reduce it? Is the government going to default on treasuries? It's supposed to be risk-free. But if you think that the government can't afford to pay you interest, and we're tenuously close to that point now, then you're going to say it's no longer risk-free, and therefore we must demand higher treasury rates until the U.S. gets its debt under control. It's the thing that you and I have been talking about. It's the thing that Ray Dalio has been warning about and has a new book on. And that's really, I agree with him and Ray and several other much older economists who have said, hey, we're almost at a point of no return. And the fact that they're trying to pass this big, beautiful bill, whether you're a Republican or Democrat, doesn't matter. If they pass a tax reduction package and don't cut expenses enough to get our deficit spending down below, 3% or less, then we are going to have the debt grow. the government can't afford to continue to pay its interest if the bond market demands higher rates. And at some point, the government has to start defaulting on something. And that is the fear that the bond market has because of this big, beautiful tax bill, the tariff threat, potential recession that could make the government have to print more money, i.e., create more debt to get us out of it. All those things are really spooking the bond market and could lead to much, much higher bond rates, even if we have a recession and even if the Fed cuts the short-term federal funds rate.
Yeah, I really think Jamie Dimon has come out after the big beautiful bill passed the House, went to the Senate, and people were estimating, 3 trillion, 7 trillion, whatever it is, added to the national debt. I really think that's where Jamie Dimon is going. It's like we have a fiscal mess on our hands.
Yeah.
And unless we are brave enough to get in front of this is going to, and we've already seen it, right? The bond vigilantes have already spoken twice and forced Trump to respond. Now they're starting to talk a third time, and we're going to see if the 10-year and 30-year continue higher. Not only that, but we have, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a section 899 in the big beautiful bill that basically penalizes investors from certain countries with an additional 5% a year up to 20% in taxes. And when I look at something like that in the environment we're in, I'm like, why are you penalizing outside capital right when you have to recycle all of this debt, right? And you already know that people are choosing to buy U.S. based assets less, and now you're going to discourage that. You're going to become sellers. It just seems like we have a lot of competing forces that could make bonds go up, because if there's less buyers and more sellers, that's not a good combination.
Absolutely. And, I had not heard about that section. So thank you for sharing that. I'll have to dig in a little deeper. I think, one of the challenges, and I don't have the solution, right? So it's easy for me to kind of armchair quarterback and say, they should do this or shouldn't do this. But one of the challenges is, even if you agree, generally speaking, with Trump's fiscal policy, basically what they're trying to do, they are agreeing in principle with Ray Dalio's, challenges to us that governments go broke, and then they don't know how to get out of it. And they basically generally have to raise taxes and cut expenses significantly, cut social programs, austerity. And then if they can't raise taxes enough and cut expenses enough, and the debt keeps growing, they have to allow more inflation. And that's what the bond market is learning. I think they're listening to Ray Dalio and going, yeah, well, they're not cutting enough. Doge hasn't cut as much as they should have. They were excited about that at first. And they're going to cut taxes. But not only are they going to cut taxes, that makes the debt continue to go up for a while. They think even if they're fiscally conservative and normally would say, yes, we want tax cuts, a lot of those big players like Dimon are going, we really need tax increases, or at least, and that's tough to do when you have recessionary type forces and people can't afford to pay more taxes. So I think what they're trying to do, Michael, is cut taxes for the masses. Not necessarily, it's not really a cut, just to be clear. It maintains the status quo. It makes what we have basically permanent. But there's a few tax cuts, like no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security. They have to make up for that somewhere. And so what they've chosen to do is make up for it with tariffs for our foreign countries. And now what you're talking about, additional capital gains, I guess, on investment. So the question is that going to backfire and make the problem with the bond market even worse? Because if foreign investors don't buy our treasuries, for example, that's going to mean that there's even less demand for them when the U.S. does need to issue them. And that makes the rates just continue to rise, at which people will actually bite and buy those U.S. Treasury bonds. So then you end up with the government in a position where the Fed has to basically monetize, they have to buy the debt themselves, add to their balance sheet. And there's interest rate, risk associated with that, and all kinds of additional growth to your debt. So some of the things, it's like, even though I'm a fiscal conservative and I generally think we need to cut expenses, and there is proof that generally lowering taxes creates investment that down the road does usually, lift the economy. But it's not that much of a difference from Democratic policies that raise taxes. They just, tend to spend more. So the problem is we've got two parties, very different ideas of how you tackle debt, of what you do, what programs you cut, how much you can cut taxes, and none of them really know what they're doing. We haven't been here before. And if there's a lot of gridlock, you're going to have all these piecemeal things that are like, well, this makes sense, but why did you add this that doesn't make sense? And so I think the fear of Jeremy Grantham, Jamie Dimon, Ray Dalio is that whenever you get this final big, beautiful bill, it's not going to do enough, and it's not going to bring down the debt. And therefore, you still have the ultimate so what, which is we need to expect that the government's going to allow more inflation because it's their only way out. And that means if we have higher inflation, we get higher interest rates, and we need higher risk premium and higher treasuries. So I think it's almost, to me, a foregone conclusion that the risk is real. Jamie Dimon's right. You started this question with, he's been wrong for so long, but the issue is these things, and they've taught me, they've humbled me, like these things take a lot longer than what we think. And when you're really on a major shift, it's what some economists call long and variable lags. Like we're like, uncle, it's been 3 years, right? And it's like, this could take another 3 or 4 or 6 or 7. And are you going to technically have stagflation? Depends on if they call it, depends on how well the numbers are manipulated. But is the real issue still the real issue? And is it going to take years for our government to figure it out and get out from our debt, which is the big problem? And I think the answer is it's going to take years. I think he's right.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things to close out on Jamie Dimon. He went on to say that he doesn't know when this is going to happen. It could be 6 months or 6 years, to your point. But he says it's coming. Right? It's coming. And then the last thing I do want to remind folks that Warren Buffett, the great Warren Buffett, decades ago, told us how we could fix this. And here's his solution. I'm doing this from memory, so I might be off. But basically said, I could fix the national debt in 30 seconds. All you have to do is pass a law that says anytime our national debt goes up greater than 3% a year, no sitting senator or sitting House member can be reelected.
Yep.
Folks, that would change the problem right there. Anna, what do you think? And give us your final thoughts.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. But I also know that right now, the amount of the budget they actually have to play with, that they actually fight over, is somewhere about 8% of all of our spending. Only 8 to 12% goes to the programs that everybody fights over, whether we should keep them or not. About 90%, give or take a couple points, goes toward the things that we cannot easily stop spending. And so therefore we need better solutions. And sometimes those better solutions require new people in Congress and both sides. Maybe we need a new party. But I think I agree with him in general. You need new people. And also, if you cut their pay, if they don't stay under budget, then they might leave as well. So, it's easy to blame the politicians. Left and right for many, many decades have contributed to this problem. But we need people to come together and find solutions. And they're not easy solutions. And I think that's the real challenge.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I think Warren Buffett is onto something. If basically, as it sits today, and the All In podcast, David Freeberg is all over this, basically saying every time he goes to DC, nobody is incentivized to cut. Everybody's incentivized to get more and more for their constituents. And it's just a recipe for disaster. So if you do create the penalty that says, hey, if we go over 3%, y'all get fired, that's not a bad outcome. Anna, where can people find you?
Great. You can find me here on the show, on social media at Anna Kelly, REI Mom. And for real estate coaching and consulting, you can book an appointment with me at AnnaKellyInvesting.com.
Thank you so much. Have a great week.
You too.